Hey, what is up everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you today. If you've been paying attention to my videos, when I talk about the WWE Network, and talk about the shows that are coming out and the shows that I watch, frequently I've brought up the fact that WWE Rivalries is one of my favorite shows on the WWE Network. The show that they did about Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair, that really got me fired up to watch a lot of old NWA, WCW, Flair versus Dusty Rhodes matches back in the day. I really wished that would have been its own DVD, pairing up that one episode and then putting on like however many matches they can fit on a DVD of Dusty Rhodes versus Ric Flair, trying to relive all of the great matches and all of the great feuds that went along with that. That was just such a great episode. And then also from there, they did one on Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon. They did one on the Hardy Boys versus Edge and Christian, and then they narrowed it down and they went right after Edge versus Matt Hardy, which involved Lita in that one as well. The episode that was on tonight was Lita versus Trish Stratus, and this was one hell of a way to bring back one of my favorite shows. This knocked it out of the park, a lot like the other episodes that I just mentioned as well. It really fits into what's going on inside WWE as of right now. I know that a lot of people are sort of down on the WWE Divas Revolution with all of the girls coming up, basically saying that it's basically being shoved a lot down your throat, and the fans are trying to revolt against this, a lot like the way that fans revolted against Roman Reigns last year, come WrestleMania 31, and people thought he was being handed the WWE World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 31. Lita and Trish Stratus are two of the divas that sort of changed the game. You know, if you think about what was going on in the Divas division around that time, you had Lita, you had Trish Stratus, you had Mickie James, you had Molly Holly, you had Jacqueline, you had Jazz, and I apologize if I left, you had Victoria was another one that was in there, and, you know, women's wrestling inside WWE was a lot like women's wrestling has been since about 2011 to about 2014, where you didn't really have girls in there that were like AJ Lee and Paige, Sasha Banks, Charlotte, Becky Lynch, Bailey. You didn't have girls that were really wrestlers. You had girls that, as the story goes, John Laurinaitis would pick up a swimsuit edition of, you know, some sort of like magazine and be like, hey, this is a hot chick. We need to sign this girl to developmental and see if she's going to be able to work out. Now, I've heard Lita's story. I remember listening to her Hall of Fame speech at WrestleMania 30 and being really into it. It's one of my favorite WrestleMania Hall of Fame speeches of all time. Her telling her story, because honestly, I saw her DVD VHS a long time ago, but it's one of the documentary DVDs that I haven't been able to pick up yet because it has sort of a high price on the DVD, and it's rare-ish. I haven't looked at it or looked for it in a while. I keep waiting, hoping that they're going to put it up on the WWE Network. But the DVD is kind of old and doesn't go throughout her whole career, so I don't think it's one that they're really looking forward to putting out sooner than later. I've heard rumors that they're going to be doing a WWE Divas DVD, talking about the divas of the past and the divas of today and sort of giving mini background documentaries into them. So we'll have to see if that's what they're going to be doing in the foreseeable future. You know, Lita, basically, you know, said that she wanted to be a pro wrestler, so she booked a flight and she went to Mexico City, where she thought was going to be the heart of Mexican wrestling, to go down there and train, where she met up with, like, Rey Mysterio, and from there, then she just started being a sponge and moving her way up and down the East Coast, before picking up a job with ECW, where she was Danny Doring's valet, with Roadkill, and she was Miss Congeniality. From there, she would basically be signed and brought over to WWE, where she would come in, and this is where the show started off, you know, with her debuting with S.A. Rios, you know, and then Trish Stratus, whose story I've never really heard told. She doesn't have a book. She does have a DVD. And I don't even know if it has a documentary on it, and I don't even know if it's like there's been times I've picked it up and thought about watching it, but then I thought it was sort of just gonna be one of those pervy, WWE Divas DVDs where it's just her in a bikini, and there's a time and a place for those kind of things, and, it's just not the thing that I think that I want to be watching. But if it was a real documentary about her career, and where she was, even though it came out in a time and place when WWE really wasn't doing good documentaries, like the DVDs that come out now really knock it out of the park. And no matter who they've done them on or what groups they do them on, if they sit down, they do a really, really good job. And I've never really heard her story. I don't know why she came from being a fitness model and came into being a professional wrestler. I don't know if they just say, hey, you're going to make a lot of money, or you know, she liked wrestling as a kid and this was something that she actually wanted to do. But that's the story that I've never really heard. But one thing leads to another. She signs with WWE. She comes in, and you know, as they're being trained to be wrestlers in, I don't really know if it's WWE developmental or if they're being trained at the Funk Dojo at Titan Towers, or what's going on. But basically the rivalry starts where Lita is looking at Trish, thinking that Trish is one of the hottest chicks she's ever seen, thinking there's no way in the world that she's going to make it onto television. But Trish is looking at Lita, seeing her do all of these high impact moves like flipping off the top rope, the Hurricanrana, you know, the splash off the top and everything like that. And she's thinking there's no way in the world that she's going to make it on television, that she's going to make it first. One thing leads to another. Lita debuts in WWE with S.A. Rios, and you know, they become a hot, you know, impact thing. I think that S.A. Rios beat Gilbert for the, was it the lightweight championship? Was it cruiserweight? No, cruiserweight was WCW. Whatever the championship was, for like the smaller guys, S.A. Rios won it. I think that he was supposed to be a hot, you know, thing for WWE. I definitely remember watching S.A. Rios matches. I know that he had Lita, and Lita was one of the things that really made him stand out because they both had this dark red hair, and you know, like in the debut match they beat Gilbert, and after the 1, 2, 3, she climbed up to the top rope, and then she did a moonsault off at the top rope just like S.A. Rios did, and honestly hers looked a lot better than his did. But I know the knock on him a lot was that he couldn't do promos because he just didn't speak English that well, and one thing led to another, and he just sort of faded to the back, and we never saw him again. I don't know where he is in the world of wrestling today, if he still even wrestles, but I do see the appeal on why WWE signed him and why they really brought him in and why they thought it would have worked. And one thing leads to another. They lost faith in him, and he fell off the face of the earth. Lita ended up getting moved over and, you know, teaming with the Hardy Boys. Why Trish would debut about a month after Lita, and she would immediately bring together Test and Albert as TNA, as a tag team, and they would, you know, have this instant rivalry where the Hardys were having matches against TNA, but Trish would, you know, cheat in the match, and Lita would always have to straighten her out. These girls have it where Trish and Lita have their debut matches inside of WWE in a 6-person intergender tag match, is where they have their first meeting where, you know, Lita immediately goes after Trish. Trish is on the run. One thing leads to another. There's chaos inside of the ring. Lita ends up getting knocked out. Albert drapes Trish over Lita as the referee is distracted in 1, 2, 3. Trish actually gets the first pinfall over them. But, you know, because they're inside of the tag division, you know, they're sort of always being managers going after each other. But one thing led to another where they actually just became real wrestlers, and they talk about WrestleMania 18, wrestling in Toronto. I believe that Lita was the champion at this time, and it was a 3-way. They don't really talk about Jazz being involved in this match, and you only see her for a split second inside of the match. But they just say how much that match really meant to her because of the fact the match was in Toronto, and it was a really, really big deal. And then they talk about the fact that, you know, from there, their matches would actually become getting more physical between the two, which led to them becoming a team, you know, where they were both on the same side, which led to them about 2002, I think is when it would come about, when they did the angle with Chris Jericho and Christian, where they bet $1 I think they bet a Canadian dollar, which from being friends with Justin and Ravi, I think is called a loony or something like that. Who would be the first one to be able to sleep with the girl. It was Chris Jericho being paired up with Trish, and it was Christian being paired up with Lita. One thing leads to another. The plan ends up being exposed, and they go on to have this intergender match after all of the relationships were being broken up. I know it didn't really play into the fact, but the heel turn by Trish Stratus at WrestleMania 20, even though the match between Christian and Christian is sort of a forgotten match that nobody really talks about, it's a really, really good match. But the heel turn at the end with a double slap by Trish to Chris Jericho, it's one of my favorite WrestleMania moments of all time, honestly. It's one that I always think about and how cool it is, how hot Trish looks with her jacket and her gazongas and all that, but the one thing that I really picked up out of this, because I don't really know where to bring this up, but how great commentary was with Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler. I don't know if it's because they weren't over saturated with tips and tidbits from Vince McMahon yelling into his ear. I don't know when that really got picked up, but man, when they were calling matches during this special, it was really, really good. They talk a lot about the rivalry. I believe this would be about 2004 is when I believe this would happen. But they have it where the angle is finally being built up enough that Trish Stratus and Lita are going to main event the match on Monday Night Raw. And in this match, I always sort of get this confused as the match where Lita breaks her neck. Of course, there's the spot where Lita does the running dive out of the ring, and Trish is supposed to catch her, but when she catches her, there's not really a lot of move for both of them to fall down. So Lita actually hits Trish and then folds over, and it looks like she takes all the impact on her neck. And watching the match, it just looks like she straight breaks her neck. From there, the two would brawl around, and I can't remember if this happened on the episode that they main event or if this was another time that they get into a brawl. But Lita takes a steel chair which hits Trish in the face, which is pretty extreme for divas. I don't think they would ever do that with divas on television today in 2015. And then just from them fighting, Trish ends up with a broken nose, where she ends up wearing one of those big face mask guards where guys break their nose in NBA basketball. They'll start wearing those and able to come back and play and not have to worry about their nose at all. And it just builds onto them, to the point where finally they said because they were friends backstage, they went to each other and they were talking about their careers and what they've done. I believe this would be 2004, maybe 2005. It was time for them to re-sign new contracts with WWE, and they just decided that it was time to walk away. They had a match in Toronto. I can't remember what pay-per-view it was. For some reason, I want to say it's Unforgiven. But it's Trish versus Lita for the women's championship. And the title's on the line. Lita came in as the champion. And Trish uses a sharpshooter. She's able to get the move. And she's able to get the win. And everybody goes home happy. I can't remember if they relinquished the championship and they form a tournament, but Lita's contract would come up just a few months later, and everyone thought that Lita was going to go into the pay-per-view. She was going to win the women's championship the same way that Trish did and be able to retire on top, and she ended up losing. I can't remember if it was Mickie James who beat her or who it was, but I remember it being a really funny moment. But then I remember being really confused that even though Lita's retirement match was on the show and she lost and that was going to be it for her, I remember being really confused that in the main event when Edge came out for his match that Lita didn't come out with her, and then we never really saw her again. I know that she was leaving WWE, but I just was majorly confused on the whole Matt Hardy Edge and Lita storyline. But these two girls really picked up and kicked off the women's division, something that we're really looking for the Divas division to do right now. So this was a really fun episode. Hopefully you guys go out of your way. Obviously you can see with me going almost 15 minutes talking about it that it was a great show, and can't go wrong with them titties.